Eugenics is happening right now in 2019 in the United States of America. Hey, I'm Kristan Hawkins. Welcome back to Explicitly Pro-Life. Make sure you're subscribing to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast subscriptions. All right, so as you can tell, I'm not at home. I'm at Kent State University, and tonight there was an interesting question that was posed to me after I finished speaking on my Make Abortion Illegal Again tour. I want you to listen to it.
Okay, so mine's for either of you. Should a prenatal diagnosis, non-fatal and genetic, for example, be a death sentence?
Absolutely not. Prenatal diagnosis, an adverse prenatal diagnosis should not be a death sentence for any human being. A study came out just this week. We learned about it that showed that 95% of children who are diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in utero are aborted. They're aborted. 95%. Two of my children have cystic fibrosis. 95%. Because why? Because of their genetic makeup. We are discriminating against human beings because of their DNA. We're saying you are going to suffer in your life. You are going to require expensive medical care your whole life. Therefore, you don't have the right to live. That's absurd. Since when do we say you're going to suffer, therefore we kill you? Our goal should be to stop the suffering, to end the suffering, not end the sufferer.
Eugenics is happening here in America. In 2019, in our woke world, when everyone is supposed to be welcomed, no matter their gender, what they think their gender is, what they want their pronoun to be, whether it's a made-up pronoun, no matter who they are, everyone is supposed to be accepted and welcomed, except if you have a genetic disability. This recent study that came out in the Genetics Medical Journal showing that 95% of kids like my Gunnar and Gracie, who have cystic fibrosis, if they're diagnosed in utero, they're aborted. This is just wrong. This is absolutely wrong. I mean, there's no other words. I mean, I don't even know how long this damn podcast has to be because it's just wrong. Discriminating against another human being because of their genetic makeup is always wrong. That's always a moral wrong. Using the, they're going to suffer line is crap because we're all going to suffer. We all know we're going to suffer. Human life, in the experience of human life, you will suffer. And actually, suffering makes you who you are in a lot of ways. Often what we hear, and when I'm on Facebook chat groups with parents who are discussing an adverse prenatal diagnosis, you hear this thing of, I don't want my child to suffer. I don't want my child to suffer. This is going to change my life. There was an article not long ago in New York Times Magazine, The Cut, where a woman talked about her son Dudley and how she was suing her OBGYN for not informing her in advance that her son had CF because if she had known, she would have aborted him. It was a wrongful birth lawsuit. And she talked about, how she loved him so much she didn't want him to suffer. You can't love somebody so much that you want to kill them, that you want to induce a heart attack and have them die, that you want them to be violently dismembered in the womb, that you want them to drown in a toilet on a college campus. That's not love. And the undercurrent I hear and I see as someone who experiences this and lives it out in my day-to-day life is while you're talking about you don't want to be around, you don't want your child to suffer, it's about you don't want to have to experience that suffering with your child. Because as any parent knows, when your child is going through anything, broken foot, a hurt elbow, cystic fibrosis, cancer, regardless of the severity of the issue, you would give anything to replace your child there. To say, I will take your spot. You won't have to, I'll suffer this. I'll go through the pain. I'll go through the trauma because no parent wants their child to go through anything. And so often what you hear, kind of this undercurrent of, I don't want my child to suffer is, I don't want to have to suffer. And this is going to be bad for me. And it is. If you have a child with genetic disabilities, if you have a child where you know you may outlive your child, you will suffer. And that's a reality. But killing your child isn't solving the problem. It's just making you a mother or a father of a dead child who you killed. What's so fascinating is Planned Parenthood is actually championing this rush to, be the premier discriminators in the United States. It's Planned Parenthood, the abortion industry. The fact that, we call everybody by their preferred pronouns, and there's 60-some genders, and we're all inclusive of everybody's feelings all the time, and we can't say anything that's going to hurt anyone or trigger anyone from any memory that they've ever had. This is Planned Parenthood, but then we can discriminate against people because of genetic code. But only if they're still in utero. It doesn't make sense. And it's actually, this is not politically smart, I would say, for Planned Parenthood, because the majority of Americans, when you actually have this conversation with someone in real life, they get it pretty fast. Now, they hear the Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry talking points, and a lot of times they kind of get duped and be like, oh, yeah. But then when you actually have a real conversation, or you say, hey, meet my son Gunnar, meet my daughter Gracie, do you think they should have been dismembered in the womb? No one believes that. It's not really a good position politically. I don't think it's politically advantageous for Planned Parenthood to take this position of being the leading discriminator, the killing of people based on their genetic code, because guess what other camp they're being put in with? What other groups of people throughout history discriminated against people because of their genetics, because of their DNA? I don't think Planned Parenthood should want to be a part of that list. But this is where we're at. Today, reproductive rights can mean eugenics. Just 2 years ago, Planned Parenthood was celebrating their 100th year anniversary. And they had, I think, Joss Whedon, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy. He produced like this video for Facebook. Lena Dunham was a narrator, and it was all about Planned Parenthood's history. And I thought it was really clever because Planned Parenthood started with Margaret Sanger, and they went through today and how much Planned Parenthood's been the savior for the world and blah, 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 and for women. And they actually addressed Margaret Sanger's racism and the fact that she was a known eugenicist, and she hung out with other eugenicists. But the way they got around it was, well, it was the accepted viewpoint of the day. And while this isn't accepted today, it was accepted then. It was smart of them. They actually addressed Margaret Sanger's racism, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who said, we don't want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. Now, Lothrop Stoddard, one of the co-founders of Planned Parenthood, he was actually on the 15-member board of directors for Planned Parenthood when it was originally called the American Birth Control League. Lothrop Stoddard is a known eugenicist. You can Google him. I've got a quote here on my phone I wanted to read to you. Because it's crazy. He was a KKK member. He had personal meetings with Hitler, personal meetings with Nazi SS leader, who presided over the killing of 6 million Jews. He wrote a book, The Rising Tide of Color, and this quote. It's finally perish. That is the exact alternative which confronts the white race. Just as we isolate the bacterial invasions and starve out bacteria by limiting the area and amount of their food supply, so we can compel an inferior race to remain in its native habitat. This man was literally on the board of directors for Planned Parenthood. How do they reconcile that? Alan Guttmacher, the second president of Planned Parenthood, they have the Guttmacher Institute that's supposed to be like the independent source for all abortion data in our country, which we know is not. It, at one point was officially part of Planned Parenthood. Now it's separate, but we all know who they are. Alan Guttmacher was the president of the American Eugenics Society, which now they changed their name a few decades, I think it was like 1960s, 1970s, to American Genetics Society because it sounded better. But that was the second president of Planned Parenthood. if you want to get kind of the whole history of Galton and, the kind of the guy who invented the term, he was like the half cousin of Charles Darwin. He used Darwin's research to kind of come up with this term eugenics and how to improve the stock of the human race. You should watch Maafa 21. It was produced by Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher. It's MAAFA21.com, I would think. I think that's their website. I know they put up on YouTube. It's a documentary, and it kind of traces the beginning of the eugenics movement in America. And it talks about, this happened, I think it was this was late 1800s, that the term eugenics, 1883, Francis Galton termed the coin eugenics. And he was a British statistician, half cousin of Charles Darwin. This is crazy stuff. And it talks about this Maafa 21, traces, what happens in this eugenics movement and how abortion, it becomes birth control and then it becomes abortion. It's a very natural progression that happens. If you want to improve the stock, if you want to change the breed, well, give them all birth control so they can't reproduce. And since we know birth control isn't 100% effective, then oops, you're going to have abortion. Planned Parenthood, this is their history. This is their history. But yet they're still supporting eugenics today. They're still supporting it. In Indiana passed a law recently that banned abortions based on the genetic code of the child, the genetic makeup of the child. So they banned Down syndrome abortion, saying if a child is diagnosed in utero with Down syndrome, you can't go and seek an abortion. It was Planned Parenthood and the ACLU who took this all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court earlier this year said that they weren't going to take it up yet, but that it probably is going to have to be discussed. Clarence Thomas gave an amazing opinion on this case. It was a 20-page concurring opinion to the ruling saying, yes, we're not ready to consider this case yet, which is a bummer for us because it basically, it says the Indiana law can't be enacted. However, it needs to percolate. We're going to have to come back to this. But Thomas, in his concurring opinion, a Supreme Court justice actually went through the eugenic history of Planned Parenthood and how this is eugenics. He compared these types of abortions for children who have fetal abnormalities to eugenics. He said that's exactly what it is, because eugenics is the practice of selective breeding intended to improve a population species, or what they used to call stock. Thomas wrote, this law and others like it promote a state's compelling interest in preventing abortion from becoming a tool of modern-day eugenics. And he went on to write how, technological advancements, this is only making this issue more pressing. The more and more we're doing prenatal diagnosis. This is what's happening with CF children. CF children are being aborted because they're being diagnosed in the womb. And technology is pushing, so basically at the moment of conception, they can say, congratulations, you're going to have a boy. He's going to have blonde hair, blue eyes. He'll die at 55 of colon cancer. Do you want him or not? That's what the abortion industry wants. They want all the abortions. They want it to be as quick as possible. So they want it in the first trimester. The abortion industry, we've talked about this before, wants abortions to be medical abortions, chemical abortions. So you're doing it. They don't have to convince doctors to go in and crush skulls and dismember human beings. They want you to just flush your child down the toilet. They don't want to have to set up independent abortion facilities and clinics in brick and mortars because they know that they're not going to make money that way. The abortion industry wants abortions to be as early as possible. And with now this technological advancement of being able to kind of predict and say what every single, problem you're going to have, something you might be predisposed to, those two things coming together is not a partnership we want. Not a partnership we want. It's very, very scary. So several states have sort of kind of picked up on what Indiana's done. North Dakota actually has a state a law banning genetic abortions for Down syndrome. It's actually, I was reading about earlier, it's actually in effect. Ohio's has already been taken to court. I heard Louisiana's is in effect. So there are states that have certain genetic discrimination laws that are in effect, but most of the ones have been passed, have been enjoined because Planned Parenthood and the ACLU have sued. I think this is going to be a very strong case, and I've written this in USA Today and other places. I think this Indiana case is going to be a very strong case when we're looking at cases that are going to chip away at Roe versus Wade. Having the abortion industry, having the ACLU, having to admit that they think a mother should be able to choose abortion because she doesn't like the sex of her baby, the gender of her baby, because she wants to be able to discriminate against her baby's DNA. That's a really good place, a very strong place for the pro-life movement to be in, a very weak and quite frankly disgusting place that the abortion industry is going to have to promote and get themselves out of. And it's only going to help me make more pro-lifers. That's absolutely for sure. Because once we talk in this way, I started off saying, when we talk about this issue of eugenics, a lot of times you'll see support when you're talking to someone about, when do you think abortion should be legal? And they'll say rape, incest, life of the mother. And you'll say fetal abnormalities. And they'll say, oh, yeah, fetal abnormalities. Dig into that. Ask them, what do you mean by fetal abnormalities? Do you think this person with Down syndrome has fetal abnormalities and should be aborted? Do you think this person with cystic fibrosis? You know somebody who has CF? You know somebody who has Down syndrome? Do you think they should have been torn apart in the womb? Once you start actually having a real conversation with human beings about this and get past those Planned Parenthood talking points, you're going to get a lot of consensus. In a study we did at Students for Life about college students and their viewpoints of abortion, we found that, not a lot of them support killing babies because of their genetic makeup, because of fetal abnormalities. 20% did. That was less than college students who supported abortion in cases of rape or life of the mother. But it was more than college students who supported abortion because of abusive relationships or if the partner left. So we have a lot of work to do. I think one of the things we can also do when you're having those conversations with friends and family who say fetal abnormalities, one, stop kind of using that term maybe. One idea would be talking about, genetic makeup, genetic disability. Do you think genetic discriminatory abortion should be legal? I've been using the term on social media, I think, genetic discriminatory abortions, because that's what they are. I mean, here's an interesting question to pose to a friend. Do you think someone, when science advances itself to the point where a person who will struggle with same-sex attraction or who will struggle with gender identity, when science predicts who those people are going to be because of their genetic makeup, should they be aborted? Would anybody in our society today? Because if you look at it, transgender individuals, people who are same-sex attracted and living out those same-sex attractions, they have a higher rate of depression, higher rate of anxiety, higher rate of suicide. Gay men, their life expectancy is significantly less than straight men. So if you want to talk about people that should be killed because they're going to have a hard life and they're going to suffer, where does the LGBTQ community fit in there? Where do they fit in? That's the question you should ask the next time someone poses this broad thing of fetal abnormalities to you as a justification for abortion. Oh, and by the way, the vast majority of abortions aren't committed in cases of fetal abnormality. Also, I would point that out because we apparently keep abortion legal for whatever reason all 9 months of pregnancy for like 3% of all abortion cases. So Planned Parenthood, the abortion industry, they're committing eugenics. They're engaging in eugenics every single day across our country. We have them on record going to the United States Supreme Court defending their eugenics beliefs. We have Planned Parenthood's founder, their board member, Lothrop Stoddard, who were known eugenicists, Lothar was a KKK member, had a personal meeting with Hitler, and yet we're still celebrating Planned Parenthood like they're this great organization of diversity, that they care for everyone, the most vulnerable in our society. And when we know they're certainly not caring for the most vulnerable, which are the preborn. And they're certainly not promoting diversity and inclusion. Because if they were about diversity and inclusion, they would be about supporting mothers and families who receive that adverse prenatal diagnosis and say, yes, your son, your daughter is going to have cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome. It's going to be a little difficult, but they're an amazing human being who deserves the same right as you and I to live, and they bring the same dignity and they have the same value to our world as you do. Thanks, guys, for tuning in this week. Check me next week. I have a new episode up. I don't know what it's going to be about yet. We'll see. Make sure you tell your friends to subscribe to Explicitly Pro-Life on YouTube, on iTunes, at Spotify. Spread the word. And if you can, leave a review in the iTunes or Spotify or however they do it, because we want to make sure people start seeing our podcast and start talking about some of the hard things and getting a little explicit too.